We're recording this on Monday, so by the time you're hearing or listening to this, Real Madrid will have played Atletico in the Champions League. Now, Carlo Ancelotti says that he loves Champions League refs, but there isn't a lot of love for refs in La Liga. We're joined by Alex Kirkland, who's our man in Madrid. Now, Alex, can you just give us a little rundown of what the issue is between Real Madrid and the referees in Spain?
Yeah, Carlo loves Champions League refs, and Florentino Perez reportedly wants to bring English refs to Spain, which gives you an idea of where we're at. I guess it's hard from the outside, I know, to understand sort of where this comes from, because you think Real Madrid, biggest club in the world, most successful club, win trophies all the time. So where does this kind of paranoia and this kind of they're all out to get us kind of conspiracy type thinking come from, in particular with regards to referees? But there is some background here, and there are some reasons as well for Real Madrid to be unhappy. It's not paranoia if they are, out to get you. And of course, the context to all of this, with what's going on with refs and Real Madrid in Spain, is the Negreira case, which is an ongoing legal case here. It hasn't reached its conclusion yet, but there are some facts that are not disputed. And what those facts are, is that for a number of years, Barcelona were making payments to a former referee who was then the vice president of Spain's refereeing committee. That fact is not disputed. Now, what those payments were being made for, what the outcome was, what the consequences were, all of that is still up for debate, and that process is ongoing. But that's kind of the background that conditions everything in terms of Real Madrid and referees. In terms of what's been going on for the last few weeks and months, there was basically a run of games where Madrid were really unhappy with specific key decisions in big games. There's 3 games in a row. They played Espanyol, Atletico, and Osasuna. The big one really was the Espanyol game, inexplicable decision. The defender basically took out Mbappe from behind when he was through on goal, wasn't sent off. It was baffling, especially with VAR. No one could really understand it, but it happened. That was such a kind of clear, I guess, and manifest error that Madrid sent a letter, like a formal letter to the federation, using some really, really strong language, talking about the league being manipulated, adulterated, calling for kind of complete reform of the system, which they have done for a long time anyway. That was then followed by 2 more games, like I say, against Atletico and against Osasuna. Osasuna was the one where Bellingham was sent off for swearing at the referee. So it was sort of one game after another, and it just built and built and built. Since then, we've had a couple of weeks without so much controversy, which I've got to say, like, from our point of view here, it's quite refreshing. It's quite nice to get a breather from it all, because it is a bit relentless at times, this refereeing talk around Madrid. But those are sort of the specific instances we've had lately, and a bit of the context as well. But it's very, very serious. You only have to, if you ever tune into Real Madrid's club TV channel before or after games, all the talk is about the refs. Not just after the game in terms of analysing decisions, but before the game as well, kind of highlighting that referee's record in previous games against Madrid, errors that might have been made. It kind of conditions everything. It's quite remarkable. And like I say, Madrid have gone as far as to call for sort of root and branch reform of the system. We may get some changes to come in the summer. There's talk of changes at the refereeing committee in terms of the president, in terms of the guy that runs the VAR. So some of those changes are going to come, we think. But will there be enough to satisfy Florentino and Real Madrid? Probably not.
Alex, just on that, I was in Madrid the midweek after Bellingham was sent off, and we asked Pep Guardiola about it, and Pep was basically saying, leave the referee alone. It was a slightly disconnected situation, because the referee at the time was being investigated for something else, but it was all part of the whole Bellingham thing. And I'm just wondering whether the Bellingham situation kind of puts it all in, it crystallises it all, because, I mean, maybe you have being based in Spain, you have a different perspective, but, the difference between an expletive followed by you or followed by off, to me, seems like, I can't see the shades of grey there. If you're saying that to a referee, you should be sent off. So what was Madrid's argument there? I know what their argument was, but what was it based in?
Yeah, you're right. Whether it was a you or an off was a bit of a misdirect, wasn't it? It was looking to shift the focus a bit. I think really the key was he insulting the referee or not? Now, Bellingham's argument, Madrid's argument, was that he wasn't talking to the referee when he said those words. It was more an expression of kind of frustration, kind of cast aside, rather than saying it directly to the referee. And in fairness, when you watch the footage, that seemed like an accurate reflection, although we should say that Bellingham's suspension in La Liga was upheld. It wasn't overturned, because the committee found that there wasn't conclusive evidence to back up his case and Real Madrid's case. I think there was also a feeling there in terms of that specific incident with Bellingham swearing, was there'd been 1 or 2 previous cases of this where Bellingham had been caught on camera swearing at the linesman or at the referee. And there was a bit of a feeling that maybe someone somewhere down the line had sort of said, okay, if this happens again, we're going to try and stamp this out. There is also a bit of a feeling that Real Madrid, I mentioned that kind of formal complaint, that letter they sent, that maybe that has backfired in a way. Because since then, like I say, the 2 games that sort of followed that, there were some high-profile decisions that went against them. Now, is that coincidence? Maybe. Is there an element of refs thinking, well, hang on, we're not going to... It's hard to say. It's very, very difficult to say. But there's no doubt that every single game now is absolutely conditioned by all of this. And that goes into the analysis of every single decision that's made by the refs.
Alex, I mean, in the Premier League, the PGMOL have made sort of a concerted effort to improve the dialogue between themselves and the clubs. And, you know, they used to go in just once a season in pre-season and say, these are the kind of rule tweaks this year and, you know, see it on the road type thing. But there are now regular meetings between the clubs after matches. And there is a sort of constant dialogue that they are trying to improve the decision-making and the understanding. Is there something similar in Spain? Are those conversations being had? Because it's sort of, from the public statements, it feels very us and them.
Yeah, there has been a move in recent years for greater transparency, I think, from refs in Spain. We hear from them more in the media. They give the occasional interview. We see more behind-the-scenes stuff. After Real Madrid's complaint, a couple of executives were invited down to the Federation headquarters to listen to the audio of the recordings of the conversations between the ref and the VAR around the Mbappe incident, for example. They did that privately. I'm not sure how much it helped, but they were allowed to do that. I mean, you mentioned England as an example. I mean, of course, here, I'd sort of jokingly mention what the Federation President Luzan alleges that Florentino Perez said to him once about wanting to bring in English refs to Spain. England is often cited as a potential model to follow here, because here the referees are basically part of the Federation's jurisdiction. You've got the Federation here in Spain and you've got LaLiga. LaLiga run the top 2 divisions. The Federation run everything else. And the referees are basically report to the Federation. And there is a move to look at England and say, we need a fully independent body for the referees. And that's one of the reforms I think that Real Madrid would like to see brought in.
Alex, I'm just looking at the fixture list. So obviously right now it's a very tight La Liga race. And May the 11th, you've got Barca Real Madrid in Barcelona. Do you think there's any possible prospect of a non-Spanish referee? Because I can imagine the pressure that the referee would be under for that game. I think we know it's not going to happen, but how much pressure are referees for the Clásico under? Because that could be the title decider with all this nonsense going on behind the scenes. You could see why it would help to have a non-Spanish referee, just like in the old firm games where the Scottish referees are often targeted as well.
They did it in Turkey, didn't they? They had a Slovenian come in to do Galatasaray Fenerbahce, so it's not unheard of.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary, the pressure. You mentioned earlier the referee who was involved in the Bellingham sending off. A story broke a couple of days later, not coincidentally, that he was being investigated for some of his business activities. An inquiry was conducted. The Federation cleared him of any wrongdoing. But that's another illustration of sort of the growing pressure that referees are under in every aspect of their lives. Now, of course, it's not going to happen for that game. But I mean, there's some people have alleged that what Madrid would like to see is them having a greater say in which referees get to referee their games. At the moment, it's sort of a 3-man panel that decides who refs each game. There's a La Liga representative, a Federation representative, and a neutral representative, and that panel picks the refs for each game. But it's hard to see what, like I say, reforms are expected, changes are expected in the refereeing establishment here over the summer. But it's difficult to see whether they would ever reach the sort of extent that Real Madrid would like to see, that they would be happy with. You're right, as you said in the intro. You know, they always point to the Champions League and European referees as doing things differently. There is a feeling that Spanish referees maybe aren't always the best communicators. Have a more sort of standoffish approach. You know, a slightly more old school. You know, sort of David Ellery style approach as a referee, and aren't as willing to sort of converse with players and engage in dialogue with players. And those are some of the sort of things that could change. But no, any big game, I mean, every game there's this discussion and this pressure, but certainly for the bigger games, for the derbies and for the Clásico, it reaches fever pitch, because you're getting to the point where, you know, with almost every single referee, there's always a previous game, a previous incident, a previous controversy that you can point to. So like I say, if there were a sort of an approved list of referees, it's a list that's kind of getting shorter all the time.
Do you think, though, as you mentioned at the start, you know, the Barcelona situation that's still ongoing, is this what it's all about? Is just Real just trying to keep the issue of referees in the public domain because Barcelona can't really have a go back?
I mean, I think it's definitely the background to all of this. And it's easy to, this has been going on now for years now, that Negreira investigation, since that story first broke. Of course, the pace of justice here in Spain moves extremely slowly.
Alex, just before you, what time scale does that relate to, that case?
Well, it was over a decade. It was from the early 2000s until I think around about 10 years ago, something like that. It was a long period of time, over a decade, that those payments were being made. And like I say, like we shouldn't, just because it's been dragged on and we haven't got an outcome, we shouldn't underestimate how serious that is. And like I say, that's a really big deal. Whatever the conclusions are, whatever the effect was, even from what we know, even from what isn't disputed, it's very, very serious. And that is reason for Madrid, like I say, to rightfully, be kind of suspicious when it comes to all of this. So there's no doubt that's in the background. What's interesting, of course, is that Real Madrid and Barcelona are also partners. They're partners when it comes to the Super League and everything else. So you've got this Negreira case, which is a massive wedge between the two clubs, but Madrid haven't always attacked Barcelona as much as you might expect on that issue and on other issues, because in other matters, like the Super League, the two go hand in hand.
Do Atleti have a position on this? Because obviously we know that Simeone's team can be quite volatile and have their own issues. Have they got a view on this, or are they kind of taking a kind of a diplomatic stance away from it all?
Basically, all the other LaLiga clubs have come out really quite strongly against Real Madrid in terms of this campaign against referees. And Atletico on social media, on Twitter, they've been posting about this quite regularly. They posted about it ahead of the derby in the league, basically making fun of Real Madrid for what they said was trying to sort of stir things up, trying to influence officials before the game. Atleti have really led the calls from other clubs to say, look, this is not okay. They kind of led a campaign of trying to say, let's show referees more respect. That's something the federation did as well last weekend. They had sort of players and referees posing in front of a kind of a slogan of respect for referees, respect for football last weekend. So Atleti have been one of sort of the leaders of that, as has pretty much every other club. They're not happy with this pressure that Real Madrid are putting on. I should say that campaign, that respect for referees campaign, is one that was met by whistles at the Bernabeu when it happened before the Real Madrid game last weekend as well.
One of you two must have a good referee story. James, you followed Arsene Wenger for ages. Oggy, you were covering Sir Alex Ferguson. One of you must have a good referee story.
I'm not going to answer that. I'm just going to take it back slightly to that. That really disappoints me that's how that respect campaign was greeted, because I do think we have a responsibility to protect the integrity of officials. You talk to most fans, well, maybe don't talk to them, but on social media, it seems like every single club's set of fans think there's an agenda from the referees against their own club. And it's a really dangerous sort of state of affairs that we've allowed clubs to publish statements questioning. I mean, I remember Liverpool did it. I mean, when they got that really bad VAR decision, it was obviously a really bad VAR decision against Tottenham, inexplicable mistake. And they released a statement questioning the sporting integrity of PGMOL. And that is a dangerous place for us to be in, as a game. We have to accept that these referees, I think the standard isn't good enough. I can't speak for La Liga because I don't watch it enough, but in the Premier League, it's got worse, definitely, and something needs to be done about that. But to sort of put the idea out there and then propagate that idea that, actually, there might be an agenda against a certain club or that referees are trying to influence the outcome is just ridiculous. And, I think we've got to make sure that whatever the failings, that there is a respect level maintained for PGMOL and for all refereeing bodies, whatever league they operate in. And sorry, I know, Rob, you wanted a really light-hearted answer to finish the section, and I'll take it quite seriously. But it just really winds me up, this.
It's so much riding on it, and referees have always and will always be an easy target for managers to deflect away from the inadequacies of their team, for players, to cover up mistakes. Referees have never had a way of answering back, and I know lots of fans would like to see referees come out and speak in the media and stuff to talk about decisions. It's obviously never going to happen. But you talk about like a respect campaign. There's so much riding on all these games and matches that the referees are always going to be an easy target for criticism and suggestions of bias one way or the other. It's just an easy thing for clubs and managers and fans to pick at.
Yeah, and look, criticism is fine. It's part of the game. It's completely fair enough. And as I say, the standard of refereeing, particularly in the Premier League, is not good enough at the moment. It needs to be better. I'm not arguing any of that. But when we start questioning the integrity of these people and suggesting that there's some sort of conspiracy to predetermine the outcome or influence the outcome of matches or who wins the title or where these trophies are going. It is just absolutely ridiculous for anyone who wants to be taken seriously to suggest that is going on. And I just sort of refute any idea that we should even entertain that as a topic, really. It's foolish, it's outlandish. It's incompetence that we're seeing. It's not corruption.
So you want me to lower the tone now, don't you?
I do. I want a story, a referee story.
Yeah, James is taking the moral high ground. I will lower the tone. So, no, I mean, you talk about Fergie. I mean, obviously, there's so many Fergie instances. The one that stands out is the Real Madrid game back in 2013. That was his last Champions League game when Nani was sent off for a high flick of the boot by a Turkish referee, and Fergie was so angry that he wouldn't speak to the media after the game. And we all know why now, because that was his last ever chance to win the Champions League. We didn't know at the time. But no, the one that stands out for me is when Ferguson accused Alan Wiley of not being fit to referee. He basically accused him of being overweight. Yeah. And the referees really fought back. I mean, I was covering that story on a day-to-day basis at the time, and it was the referees had their own union, and obviously the union fought back really hard, and they had a media guy or a spokesman who just really went after Fergie. And obviously Fergie, being a union guy from his days back in the shipyards in Glasgow, couldn't really fight back, and it got to the point where Ferguson he actually issued an apology to Alan Wiley. He said that, he apologised for questioning his fitness and things. So that was a real win for the referees, but there were plenty of times with Fergie.
Well, the one that stands, there was Martin O'Neill still tells a story about, I think it was a 2010 Carling Cup final, where in the first minute at Wembley, his Aston Villa team, I think Gabion Boglehor goes straight through on goal. He's brought down by Nemanja Vidic. It's a stonewall penalty, and the entire Villa bench are expecting Vidic to get sent off, and it doesn't happen. And Martin O'Neill is convinced that Phil Dowd, who was a referee that day, didn't send Vidic off because Sir Alex Ferguson was stood on the touchline, and he knew that he was going to get an absolute earful if he sent Vidic off in the first 5 minutes of a cup final, and decided to award the penalty and leave Vidic on. And obviously Man United went on and won 2-1.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Real are a huge club in Spain. I can imagine that the pressure of referees must be huge when they referee a Real Madrid game, because they know that any decision they make is magnified. And it was the same with Fergie when he was as United manager. And there were so many instances where you knew that a referee maybe had second thoughts, because Ferguson would use that against the referee. And I mean, I went to so many Champions League press conferences with Ferguson, and his phrase would always be, if they're playing Real or Barcelona or a big Italian club, it would always, every game, we need a strong referee. The referee has to be strong. And he was basically putting into the referee's mind that I'm watching you.
Yeah.
And James is right. That is unfair pressure. That is going beyond kind of. Ferguson wasn't accusing referees of bias, but he was making the point that I'm watching you, and the pressure that must put on them. The biggest manager in the world at the time, it's huge, and it must affect their decision making. So it is the hardest job in football, being a referee, because nobody agrees with anything you do.
Just one final one then for you, Alex. How do you see this playing out? I mean, is this a situation that will disappear when Real Madrid start winning consistently and getting decisions in their favour, or is there a concerted effort, do you think, in Spain to improve the quality of referees, and there's going to kind of be a groundswell of support for it?
Well, it comes back up every time there's a controversial decision, doesn't it? But like I say, there is sort of change potentially in the offing this summer. The Federation have got a relatively new president, and there's talk that this summer he might look to bring in, as I say, a new president of the refereeing kind of committee, who's basically the refereeing boss in Spain, a new head of VAR in Spain. So some changes but in terms of broader changes like independent refereeing body and that kind of thing, that's a bit further off. And like I say, the question is, will it ever be enough to satisfy the critics? And also just the fact, as we've picked up on, that everyone always thinks that everyone else is better off, don't they? Like I say, the call here is, let's bring in English refs. And if you say that to a Premier League fan this season, it sounds ridiculous.
They want to bring in Spanish refs.
The Real Madrid get all the best players for the Premier League, so why are they going to try and get the best referees? What's the 1, 2, 3? Michael Oliver, Anthony Taylor. Have they got a top 3 the hit list that they want to take over to Spain? I
mean, it's a good question. I don't think Florentino Perez specified in that conversation with the Federation president which exact referees he'd want, and they might not know. So you could probably just fob him off with one who's not very good, but he's English.
They should take Dale. Dale Johnson should be their advisor on referee qualities and VAR. I think that would be the best sign.
He's going to be devastated. We've had a big long chat about referees. He's not been here. His ears will be burning in the office.
Dale is the Galactico of referees and VAR, so I think definitely put it into Florentino Perez.